You're watching India Ascends. I'm Gauri Dwivedi. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, I get you stories that matter to the global Indian that talk about India's rise. As always, we start the show with headlines. US President Donald Trump bans the resistance front that was responsible for the horrific Pahalgam terror attack on the 26th of April. It's a big win for Indian diplomatic efforts, which saw 59 MPs in 7 delegations across the world after Operation Sindoor.
This is indeed a very big diplomatic win for the country. The Pahalgam attack was orchestrated by, and the credit was also taken by this front. In the course of all of our discussions with all interlocutors that we met in the United States, we impressed upon this fact that TRF is a terrorist organization that has to be curtailed.
Troubles mount for Pakistani Army Chief Asim Munir, whose Nobel recommendation letter diplomacy with US President backfired. Munir's upcoming junket to Sri Lanka, where he's set to splurge on luxury yachts, have caused massive uproar. India-US tariff talks ongoing in Washington. Trump claims that there will be access to Indian markets for American products. Sticking points remain, from non-veg milk to genetically modified seeds. Even at WTO, US claims New Delhi has no ground for retaliatory tariffs. We decode what's up with the India-US trade talks. Foreign Minister Jaishankar made a landmark visit to China this week, a sign of healing trust deficit between the two countries. But China continues to shelter Pakistan at multilateral forums, blocking attempts to block Pak-backed terror groups. Is this reset really possible without addressing these friction points? India Ascends decodes. Are there hopes for Nimisha Priya, the Kerala-born nurse who is in Yemen facing execution? India continues to engage with friendly nations as its diplomacy is in overdrive to help the Indian-born nurse. All right, viewers, our top story on India Ascends, a major victory for India's fight against terror, as President Donald Trump has declared the resistance force, the Lashkar-e-Taiba-linked terror outfit behind the horrific Pahalgam terror attack, as a foreign terrorist organization, just a week after Trump wined and dined with Asim Munir at the White House. Now with TRF, a foreign terror organization, it means that anyone backing or funding this group is a criminal under US law. Pakistan's terror factories have received a big blow. Now this is important, viewers, because this is a validation of India's position on Pakistan and its state-sponsored terror. But more needs to be done. The charity front of Lashkar-e-Taiba, that is Jamaat-ud-Dawa, that needs to be banned. And India must continue to push for stronger action when it comes to the Lashkar-e-Taiba linchpin, that is Hafiz Saeed, mastermind of the 2006 Mumbai attacks, comfortably living in Pakistan. And it's not just Hafiz Saeed, but many more who continue to freely roam in Pakistan. Now, as for Islamabad, which till now managed to get China to ensure TRF was not banned as per the UN Security Protocol, is now both exposed and isolated. But viewers, as for China, this is a question we ask tonight. Will China now finally block TRF? It has blocked terrorists to be designated as global terrorists, something that India has been trying to do again and again. On your screens is that timeline that tells you that even specifically with regard to TRF, China did not let that happen. It used its technical hold again and again, something that it keeps doing. It has been backing the Islamabad proxy war all along, and it did so with TRF as well. But with US now designating it, will Beijing now finally be forced to act against TRF? And all others, it has used its technical hold to safeguard and shield up till now? That's the question that we are asking right here. And finally, viewers, as far as the Trump administration is concerned, it's clear that trade tensions are not likely to be the only thing defining the US-India relationship. It's much bigger than that. Addressing some of India's core concerns on terror has been a big highlight of this relationship. And there is more potential with regard to collaboration regarding greater intel and more resource sharing, something that Tulsi Gabbard mentioned when she was here in her trip early into the Trump administration. But there's a flip side, viewers. Trump is all. In fact, Trump is, after all, a transactional president, someone who believes in some sort of an give and take. And the question is, could this mean more defense purchases from the US? What will that take possibly be? Is a question that we leave for another day. But for today, it is India's big diplomatic win that has led to TRF being designated a global terrorist organization, with Pakistan exposed and China being finally brought on the mat to ask the big question as to how long it will continue to support Pakistan's proxy war. Which brings us to talk about Asim Munir, an army chief who seems to be spending less time with his men in uniform and more time as far as junkets and foreign trips are concerned. He recently was in the US, where he dined with Trump. He even recommended him for the Nobel Peace Prize. But then he went ahead to Saudi Arabia, then he went to UAE, then he went to Azerbaijan. And now Asim Munir is headed for a one-week tour, first to Sri Lanka and then to Indonesia. Now, unfortunately for the Pakistan Army Chief, none of these visits have had the desired impact. On one end, his Nobel letter did not come in the way of Trump banning the terror outfit TRF, which is an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba. On the other end, Asim Munir's junket to Sri Lanka has caused massive outrage amongst Pakistanis who are questioning the lavish spends on this visit at a time when they are struggling for basics. Now, last month, when Pakistanis thought Munir was in Washington for major foreign policy objectives of Islamabad, he was actually found shopping in high street malls of Washington. Now he is going to be in Sri Lanka, where he's going to be in luxury resorts. He's going to be enjoying helicopter rides, visit all the touristy places across Sri Lanka. So what if there are austerity measures for Pakistan's ministers? After all, Munir is known to have a healthy disregard for rules. He's only the first sitting field marshal to reward himself for losing wars. Rumors of a coup are ripe in Islamabad, which for long has been subservient to Rawalpindi. And that could be one of the reasons why Asim Munir is choosing to undertake these many trips. Now, Munir's visit to Indonesia follows Jakarta's refusal to back Pakistan's rant on Kashmir at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation meeting in May. Well, viewers, as far as New Delhi is concerned, this means it needs to continue building on its neighborhood policy. The fact that Pakistan was isolated at the OIC, that diplomatic maneuvers needs to continue. As for Asim Munir, well, his junkets are going to continue, and Pakistan will once again ask for yet another bailout to fund those lavish yachts and those trips. Since 7th of July, Donald Trump has issued 26 tariff letters, viewers. But India remains an exception, indicating that negotiations are ongoing and have not broken they're not broken down as they have with other nations. In fact, viewers, almost every American ally or partner, whether it's the EU, Canada, South Korea, Mexico, Philippines, have all witnessed tariff action. But this means that India's strategy has so far worked. But in a mercurial Trump administration, things are far from over. As things stand, New Delhi is facing a three-front tariff war, from Trump's reciprocal tariffs to levies on pharma, which are also expected to hit on the 1st of August, in just a fortnight, in fact. And then there are those possible duties for importing Russian oil, while a high-level Indian trade team is in Washington to iron out the final contours of a potential India-US trade pact. Washington is hitting New Delhi with a half-baked tariff policy, threatening key sectors, pharma, oil being some of them. In fact, US is India's largest pharma sector, and market, with exports touching almost $10 billion. New Delhi supplying 47% of the generic American drugs, a low-cost supplier for high-quality drugs. A 20% duty on drugs will severely squeeze the Indian pharma companies' margins, but will also hurt the American consumer, and that's the larger thing here. Let's now also focus on the other aspect of the Trump tariff volley, which is the NATO chief's comment. He spoke about and said that he's warning countries like India not to buy Russian oil, or else they will be slapped with over 100% as secondary tariffs. First, hear what he said, and then we come back and tell why Mark Rutte is completely wrong.
That President Trump said, basically, if Russia is not serious about peace talks, within 50 days, he will slam secondary sanctions on countries like India, China and Brazil. So my encouragement to these three countries particularly is, if you live now in Beijing or in Delhi, or you are the president of Brazil, you might want to take a look into this, because this might hit you very hard.
Now, viewers, Mark has been in his present role as NATO chief for just over 9 months. But the Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for 3.5 years. And in this time, India has continued to buy Russian oil. In fact, Russia's share in India's overall oil imports has risen from under 2% to now over 35%, ahead of traditional suppliers like the Saudis, like Iraq. And since the Ukraine war started, Russia started offering heavy discounts to those who were buying its oil. Moscow needed to fund its war economy. And India, which imports about 88% of its oil, did find a cheaper alternative. And Trump, remember, is transactional. He is mercurial. Well, if Russian oil is out of the market, it is higher, then that prices will have an impact on the American consumer as well. So which is why the NATO chief seems to be out of sync with how global economics will be impacted, how politicians around the world will be impacted, and which is why when he schools countries like India about do not buy Russian oil, he seems to be disconnected with how some of the other politicians, including Donald Trump, are unlikely to take this bait. All right, to talk more on Trump tariffs, let's get you a big voice joining us on the broadcast, Mr. William Buter, who is an American-British economist, an Indian independent economic advisor. He's been former chief economist at Citi as well. So you have an illustrious bio. Let me start by asking you about the deal that has been in the offing between India and the US. How soon do you think this could be struck?
Well, this is likely to take a while still. There's not just the original deal, the 26% reciprocal tariff that has to be renegotiated, which is supposed to be done by August 1st, and hopefully for India will be lower than that. Indonesia just got 19%, starting from 32%, so India ought to end up somewhere below that.
Okay.
But there are, of course, the further problems that BRIC nations, which includes India, are threatened with a 10% additional tariff. There is the 100% threat of the secondary tariffs because of India's purchases of Russian oil. And there's the...
Do you think that will actually come through, sir?
I think this something like that, a penalty of this kind, targeting Russia, but through its clients, including China, India, and Brazil, it is quite likely, yes, that something, not necessarily 100%, will be imposed. This is not just an idle threat. The US has changed its stance towards the Russia-Ukraine war, and it tries to impose heavy sanctions on Russia, both directly and indirectly, by, in a way, sanctioning its major export destinations, which includes India.
Okay, so you are saying that that is a possibility in terms of the tariffs that we just spoke about, or do you think these could just be hardline tactics? Donald Trump is known to have those hardline tactics, whether with the allies, whether with partners, with everybody.
Oh yes, you can never believe everything you hear from Mr. Trump, and even when he offers a deal, this is a deal only until he changes the deal. It's very difficult to get long-term credible commitments. But I do think that there will be sanctions on Russia through secondary tariffs on countries that purchase Russian oil, and also the pharma sector is a very sensitive one politically in the US, and while 200% is unlikely to be the final figure, I can see some protectionist measures for pharma being imposed in the US through higher tariffs than for commodities in general.
All right. Those may be potential deal breakers, in fact, Mr. Buter. Let's see how that actually unfolds, because some of that is actually no-go areas for India as well. I'm going to leave it there, sir. Thanks much for speaking to us on India Essence today as we decode what could be the dynamics that are at play between India and US as they thrash out that trade deal. Viewers, I'm going to slip into a very short break, come back on the other side of India Essence, talk more about the China-India relationship. There's been a thaw, there's been a visit of the External Affairs Minister once for the first time in 5 years. But what about the trust deficit? How do we fix that? We come back and talk on that and a lot more. Stay with us. One of India's most important relationships is the India-China relationship, one with whom we actually share a long border, one which actively also supports Pakistan, one which stonewalls India's efforts to name and shame Islamabad's terror factories. But China is also a crucial economic partner. It's an influential global South voice. And these dynamics were in fact at play at Dr. Jaishankar's first visit to China since the Galwan clash in 2020. And this report decodes how to address that biggest issue in the relationship, that trust deficit. Take a look.
A firm handshake and a photo op that may have once been inconceivable a year ago. Foreign Minister S Jaishankar met Chinese President Xi this week during a landmark China visit, the first in 5 years since the 2019 Galwan clashes and 2 months since India's Operation Sindoor against Pakistan. The foreign minister met many key Chinese officials, including Vice President Han Zheng and his counterpart Wang Yi, as diplomatic engagements between the two sides is in overdrive. On paper, New Delhi and Beijing continue to highlight the positive trajectory of ties, since the de-escalation in the Himalayan border, even restarting crucial pilgrimage visits. Yet, in reality, growing trust deficit remains unaddressed and numerous sticking points remain. Perhaps the most crucial among them, the China-Pakistan nexus, Beijing's support for Islamabad as an all-weather ally via weapons and its policies harboring terrorists. Yet, Jaishankar wasted no time reminding the SCO of its founding objectives, fighting terrorism.
SCO was founded to combat terrorism, separatism, and extremism. It is imperative that the SCO, to remain true to its founding objectives, take an uncompromising position on this challenge.
Be it restarting the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra or the disengagement at the borders, steps have been taken to reset India-China ties. Yet, while Beijing signaled openness to dialogue and mutual respect for each other's concerns, it shielded Pakistan from facing accountability at the SCO meeting by removing any mention of the Pakistan link to the Pahalgam attack, a red line for India, which led to no joint statement being adopted at the defense ministers' meeting.
Viewers, we now turn attention to the Middle East, an area that is now extremely important for India as it is now becoming a major stakeholder. And there's yet another flashpoint in this region, this time between Israel and Syria. And it has ramifications and implications for New Delhi. This report decodes that for you.
War or recovery? That's the choice Syria's militant-turned-president Ahmad al-Shara must make after Israel rained down missiles on Damascus this week. A warning of a fresh flashpoint in the Middle East. Israeli strikes hit key Syrian government buildings, including the heart of its military establishment. The most serious threat to the country's new leadership, who ousted longtime despotic leader Bashar al-Assad last year. So what triggered Israel's military action in the country? Weeks-long deadly clashes in southern Syria's Suweda between the religious minority Arab Druze people and the Sunni Bedouin tribes, causing al-Shara to deploy troops in the region. A move Tel Aviv fears brings Islamist fighters near the demilitarized zone on its northern border near Golan Heights. Netanyahu claimed it was to protect the Druze community, while the Syrian president condemned the strikes as an attempt to deflect from the Israeli leader's domestic troubles.
אנחנו קבענו מדיניות ברורה, פירוז המרחב דרומית לדמשק, מהגולן ועד אזור הר הדרוזים. זה קו אחד. הקו השני, שמירה על האחים של האחים שלנו, הדרוזים בהר הדרוזים.
كما أخص في كلمتي هذه أهلنا من الدروز الذين هم جزء أصيل من نسيج هذا الوطن. إن سوريا لن تكون أبدا مكانا للتقسيم أو التفتيت أو زرع الفتن بين أبنائها.
At home, political tremors are shaking Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition government. Multiple ultra-Orthodox parties quit the government over a military draft reform dispute, forcing Netanyahu to now run a minority government. The Israeli PM also faces a long-running corruption trial, which was adjourned this week due to the strikes in Syria. While Netanyahu does all he can to hold on to power, how does this latest flashpoint impact New Delhi? Further instability in the Middle East triggers volatility in India's oil supply and could potentially spike prices. It could also impact the millions of Indian diaspora who live and work in the Gulf. New Delhi must diversify its energy sources at a time when potential US sanctions on Russia also threaten New Delhi.
All right, viewers, but that is a wrap of this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.